The first time I met him was in end of '69. And we met him simply because we had met the devotees, the first devotees who just arrived in France. And they just arrived, and 1 week after, we met them. So I say we because we were 3 French girls who at the same time, we were school friends. And at the same time, we met the devotees, and at the same time, we joined. So that's why usually I say we, because we were the 3 of us together, Mandakini, Ilavati, and myself. So we went to see the devotees who had no temple or nothing at that time. They just were preaching at the American Center. And one day they told us, our spiritual master is going to be in London. Do you like to go see him? So at that time we were planning to go to Tibet to become monks. And we thought, oh, why not? That's a good idea. We're going to see a guru. We were going to have a Buddhist guru in Tibet, so why not try see what is a guru? So it's in that idea that we went to see him. It was not completely with the idea of becoming devotees. It was just checking out an Indian guru. And so we went to London. And it was a very, very great reception because we were the 3 first French devotees. So everybody had told Prabhupada, the 3 first French devotees are arriving. So everybody was waiting for these first French devotees. So as soon as we arrived on the day the deities were installed in London, in what was that street? No, Soho Street was much after, the one that before, it skipped my mind now. So on the first day it was just the installation of the deities. And then the next day we were all brought to Prabhupada so that he would see. So we just arrived and we immediately saw Prabhupada. And my impression at that time, because I had all these Buddhist ideas, and the idea is that the spiritual master, you just look at him, and he throws, you have some spiritual fluids, that goes from him to you, and you become spiritually enlightened. So that's what I was expecting when I saw Prabhupada. And it didn't happen. That's not the way it happened. What Prabhupada just told me, and these 2 other girls, he just said he was very happy to see us. And he said it's very nice, and that it would be very good that we have very nice examples here with Jamuna, Janaki, Malati. So he talked to us in this very simple way, which was not at all what we expected. So the first connection was like that, to meeting him for the first time in his room. But then the transcendental fluid, in fact, that I was hoping to have from Prabhupada happened more in the temple room. And as Prabhupada was talking, he was, of course, always talking this personal philosophy. And in my mind, as he was talking, I was always thinking, yes, but, I don't accept that, I don't accept that. I was arguing with him, with what he was saying philosophically, but only thinking, And then what was very astonishing is that each next class, he would defeat all the arguments that I had in my mind the day before, And this went on and on like that for many days. So much that towards the end, I started to feel convinced that after all, maybe personalism is a higher philosophy than impersonalism. So it was just done, it was not done through direct question and answers. But personally, I think that I've been convinced of personalist philosophy over impersonalist philosophy by Prabhupada directly in that way, in these first days. And the other thing that convinced me also were the kirtans and the chanting of Hare Krishna. This was, each time I was in the temple room with Prabhupada and with the kirtan, I was thinking, no, I stay here. I don't go to Tibet. I don't go to a Tibetan monastery. And then when I would leave Prabhupada's presence and the chanting's presence, I'd think again, no, what am I talking about? I'm not staying here. I'm going to be a Tibetan monk, a Buddhist monk. And this went on like that for the whole week, until at the end of the week, I was convinced that I would stay and become a devotee. After the 5 first days of our stay there was supposed to be initiations. So Prabhupada told Tamal Krishna that we should be initiated. And Tamal Krishna told me that, Prabhupada, they've been here only 5 days. We're not going to initiate them now. But Prabhupada asked that we be initiated. And so, because Tamal Krishna didn't want to, we were initiated 1 month later. But it's also significant that Prabhupada seeing us and seeing us how interested we were, and chanting and dancing with so much enthusiasm and participating with enthusiasm, and maybe, as I think and you thought, maybe also reading the minds, say that we should be initiated at that moment. So that was the first connection with Prabhupada. So at that time, if Prabhupada was not directly there, you were initiated by letter, which meant that we would send a letter saying we would like to be initiated. We would send beads, and we would send dakshin. And so this is also a very funny part, is that at that time, the dakshins were not like now money. We were all hippies with nothing, and the dakshins were whatever we could do or find, very simple things. So my dakshin, because at that time I liked very much to paint, I just painted a little picture of Krishna for Prabhupada, and this was my offering for initiation to Prabhupada. I remember Yogeshwari's dakshin was a pair of socks. But Prabhupada, he was so nice with his disciples that little picture, he hung it in his office, in his room, and the picture was there. So, and then Prabhupada would chant on our beads, and it would be sent back to us with a letter explaining that he was accepting us as disciples and giving some instructions. And the beads on which he chanted, this was the way we were initiated at that time. When I was in London, before I went to Germany to do the BBT, I did some paintings, because Jamuna, knowing that I like to paint, I had done this little painting for Prabhupada for the Guru Dakshin. So she asked me to do some painting to decorate the temple. So I did, one big one, one small one, and it happened that the small one, the Panchatattva, was hanging in the staircase. So when we were, at one moment, we were going with Prabhupada down the staircase, and he saw that painting. So he immediately stopped, and he asked, who had done that painting? So I was right behind him, so I told Prabhupada that I did the painting, and then he said immediately, so you must come and do paintings and artwork for my books, which I never did, but he proposed. I mean, that was one capacity I had, but there was other things that were more important to do that he told me to do later on. So the other thing that I didn't mention, which is interesting, is that Prabhupada was so concerned with his books that one of the first questions, in fact, in London, the first time we saw him in '69, was, do you know how to type? And for me, this was a really strange question. A spiritual master, instead of giving this high spiritual understanding and fluids, he's telling you, do you know how to type? And in fact, I realized after, Prabhupada wanted me to do the French publications of his books. So as soon as he saw French devotees, immediately he was thinking of doing the work for the translation. And very shortly after, I was translating the BTGs and then translating the books on his instruction. And then we had organized, that was bigger, more people came, and it was younger people. We had organized a lecture for him at the School of Architecture in Paris. So I was translating for him the lecture, and Prabhupada was very nice, because he saw that I didn't have much, I was not very expert yet in translating. It was the first time I was doing it. So Prabhupada would be speaking very short sentences. And then as I was able to do, along the years, as I was able to translate better, then he would make the sentences much longer. And at one moment, it was astonishing, I was translated, and I forgot to translate a part of what he said. And he noticed it. I don't know how he did, because I don't think Prabhupada knows French. But he noticed I missed a part. And he told me again the part I missed, so that I would translate it. So, and I did. I organized this with some other devotees. We made many pretty important people from France to come. One of them was from the government, a deputy, and one of them was the biggest university professor on Indian philosophy. How do you say in English? Indologist, I think I say. So all these people came to see Prabhupada, and when they would come, I would present to Prabhupada who they were, and then they would discuss together, and sometime myself, sometime Yogeshwar, sometime another devotee called Prituputra, we would translate the discussion. So what was very interesting during this discussion, one was at first, I was very glad to see that, but Prabhupada always wanted, like I said earlier, he wanted the devotees to come and listen. Because later on, it was impossible to approach Prabhupada. You know, there was his guards always keeping the door closed. But at the beginning, Prabhupada always wanted the devotees to come. And he wanted it because he wanted them to learn how to preach by hearing him. And it's a fact that by hearing, we would learn a lot of how to preach, because so many different kind of people were coming to see him. So by being there for translating and for presenting the people who were coming, I noticed in his way of preaching to people that he would very much adapt to the different personalities. And sometimes he would have very friendly talks, and sometimes he would have pretty heavy discussion. And for example, one of those I brought, this professor from the university, Professor Lacombe, the head of Indologists in France. He was in fact a very nice person, because he was not just someone who teaches without believing in what he's teaching. He was someone who was actually believing in the philosophy. But he was in fact following a sampradaya, the Ramanuja sampradaya. So when Prabhupada talked with him, it was a wonderful, friendly talk. You know, they talked in Sanskrit together. And Prabhupada was talking like with a friend, you know. So where have you been in India? Do you know this, you know that? You know, very, very friendly talk. And I'm sure that if he had this very friendly talk with him, because this person was a sincere believer, he was not just someone who talks philosophy, but because, you know, that's his job, but it was because really he was believing in everything he was teaching. So it was a very nice talk. When he was talking to Christians, he would always, instead of like I would have been expecting that he would be discussing on comparative philosophy, very often he would bring the point, and strongly, of not eating meat and the animals having a soul. And at the beginning, I was wondering, why is he doing that? And then I realized, is in fact, these two religions, Vaishnavism and Christianity, they are very close, because they are both monotheists, they are both impersonal. So the point was not to discuss these things where there is big similarities. What he wanted to bring out is that the big flaw in Christianity is this meat eating and killing. So very often he would, when meeting religious people, Christian religious people, bring these points, trying to prove to them philosophically that animals have a soul, using the regular, you know, philosophical arguments we gave, how the soul is going from one body to the other, and how the animal is changing bodies, but the soul is always there, just like when the child, and then you have the adult, they look so different, but it's still the same person and the same soul, so that the soul also, the animals are growing from body to body, but that there's a soul. So it's this is interesting, that Prabhupada was putting first, trying to see what was the problem in the flaw, what was missing in Christian philosophy was this understanding, because it's a fact that most of the Western countries are Christian, and most of the Western countries eat meat. And where is it from? It's from the religion. I mean, the Christianity would be forbidding meat, and most of the Western people would be vegetarians. So in fact, it's a very, very important point in these countries that are all Christian, to bring the points to the religious people of not killing animals, that animals have a soul. So he would often come with these points to these people. One is very interesting. It was a deputy. I mentioned earlier I met a deputy. So what was interesting about this deputy is that Prabhupada, he had a very good discussion with him. So what's bad is that I don't remember, you know, it's so many years ago, the details of this discussion. I just remember some points. But for us, I remember the points that struck me, you know. on how Prabhupada was preaching. And to the politician also, amongst other discussion, philosophical discussion, he brought the point of animal killing also. Because, I mean, the politician, there are also some people who can do something about it, you know. So he talked about that, and of course the deputy, you know, would not accept easily. He couldn't see how people would survive if they didn't eat. And Prabhupada came to the point at the end, and that was also astonishing, where he said that if people absolutely want to eat meat, that then eat the cows when they are dead. Wait until their natural death and then eat them, you know. So that was also interesting. I never anywhere else heard Prabhupada talking like that. And one funny thing happened. This is interesting, not for the story itself, but for Prabhupada. He was so humoristic, and he was always so quick to answer to something. You know, he was always amazing us for that. So one of the person we brought was a psychiatrist. And the reason I thought of bringing this person is that this psychiatrist was pretty much known in France, and he was a religious psychiatrist. And when he was trying to take care of his patients, it was through spiritual life. He was trying to show them how spiritual life would help them, religious life would help them. He was very religious. So I had him come, and so I went down, you know, to receive him, to bring him to Prabhupada. And when I was downstairs, he wouldn't come. So so I went back to Prabhupada, and I told him what happened. I said, well, I meet him downstairs, but no, it's not that he wouldn't come. What happened exactly is that when I met him, so this is how I retold it to Prabhupada, I met him downstairs and I invited him to come in to see you, but what he said was, where is the patient? So he had understood. He was maybe a very good psychiatrist, but I guess he misunderstood what he was asked, and he thought that we had asked him to come and take care, I guess, of some Indian pandit or spiritual master. He didn't understand that it was to have a philosophical discussion with him. So when I saw that to Prabhupada, that his answer was, where's the patient? So Prabhupada, he was laughing and laughing, and that when he realized there was no patient, he didn't want to come and just left. So when I told that to Prabhupada, Prabhupada just started to laugh, and he said, he didn't realize he was the patient. So this is funny. Prabhupada was very, I mean, I just have a few funny stories about Prabhupada, but so many devotees have told me stories. Well, Prabhupada is so funny, you know. So I organized a whole big publicity throughout Paris. You know, we had very big posters of Prabhupada that we would put on the walls everywhere. We had smaller ones that we would put in all the stores, on the doors of the stores. And I had organized that all the streets of Paris were covered, you know. And it was even at the point that these big posters of Prabhupada, we put them in so many different places that they stayed there for months and months and months. And we would be driving through Paris or going here and there. You had always Prabhupada all over Paris. So I mean, it was an easy time also at that time. You could put your posters everywhere. You know, now it's more difficult. But so I was in very much anxiety because we had this big hall, you know, and I was hoping it would be filled, you know. So when I arrived to translate for Prabhupada, I was in this anxiety, you know, entering into the room to see how it was. And when I entered, it was filled with people, you know. Out of 2,000 places, we had 1,800 people who came. So it was really a big success. And we had this big stage. Prabhupada was there with a nice vyasasana and all the devotees sitting around him, and I translated for Prabhupada. So Prabhupada gave a lecture, and again he tried to do something which would have to do with France, and France being a Catholic country. He started his lecture with how in Christianity it is said that at the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So he used that to show the importance of the Word, the mantras, the name of Krishna. And then he gave this lecture, and but something happened then. Is that at that time, the people, there was a lot of, the young people were very much into politics, and especially into communism. So many of the people who came, they were these people, communist people. And at one moment, Prabhupada gave an example, which is no problem if you are not in a political situation, but which might be very dangerous in a political situation, how the authority of the king, and how the person who is under the king has as much authority. He also has great authority because his superior is the king. You know, he mentioned something like that. Oh, this was pretty bad at that moment, and you had all these people, you know, who started to make noise, and more and more noise in the back of the hall. And I was very much getting anxiety, what's going to happen, you know. And fortunately, the devotees, they were able to calm down the people, and we could go on with the lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, one of these people, or another one, I don't remember, one came up, you know, really angry, came down, and he started to talk. And he said, "Why are you sitting on this throne?" And he said it in a very harsh way, very bad way. So this is also funny how Prabhupada, he senses everything. I was very embarrassed to translate for him what that man said. So I kind of arranged what he said, you know, so that it would not be so bad. And then Prabhupada told me, "No, what did he say?" Exactly. And I had to say exactly exactly what that person said. So then Prabhupada always very good at giving good answers. He said that you can also sit on this seat if you can talk on spiritual philosophy. So the person didn't know much what to say anymore if he could also do it. And so it stopped like that. But then, and that's where it's very instructive, Prabhupada, after we left, he said, "From now on, when I'm in France, you should just give me a regular seat, no Vyasasana, you know." And this is instructive in the sense that you can see that Prabhupada, he didn't care for the external of his preaching mission, Vyasasana or no Vyasasana. You know, if it's good, we have one. If it's not good, we don't have one. It's not that he was attached to the external ritualistic aspects of Krishna consciousness. So this is a good point, and I often use it when I discuss with devotees, because very often people are very, very attached to the externals, and they are not ready to adapt according to the situations or the country or the different times. But Prabhupada himself was always an example how you can really, you must adapt, you know, according to circumstances. It doesn't matter. The important is to preach. The not important is the Vyasasana or no Vyasasana. I remember that in London I was going the morning walks. Even at one morning walk there was one nice thing that astonished me very much. And then later on, thinking of it, I was thinking, wow, such a nice and kind person Prabhupada is. We were just completely new people, you know, the three of us, and so we were going on the morning walks with Prabhupada. And at one moment, it was December, so it's very cold in December in London. At one moment, he turned around to my school friend, Mandakini, and he told her, "Are you cold?" And I found that pretty proud, you know, that here, who were we, you know, these completely young girls, new girls, you know, just arriving there. And the Prabhupada, this great spiritual master, is concerned, you know, that the person is not cold, you know. That was very nice. It's the only really time when I went to him with a very particular problem and asking him to solve this problem, you know. Otherwise I was just serving him in these different capacities, but I never had to go. In fact, that was the only problem I had in the movement, which I'm working on now, as you can see. It is that it was the time when it started to develop in the whole movement that the women could not give class, you know. So I had been giving classes for years and years. I've been lecturing outside in schools, in universities, you know, in so many different places, giving the Sunday lectures. I mean, doing because you know, it was in my mentality to do all this preaching. So this it started in America, that the women could not give classes. And in France, they didn't dare to tell me not to give classes, but they were lobbying against women giving classes, you know, when it came from America to Europe. And the men who before used to attend the classes very happily and be very satisfied and always asking me questions after the classes. And they started to, I felt it, you know, they started to not want so much to come to the class when it was me giving it, you know. All these things started because they were getting all these instruction against women, you know, in the temple, and their mentality, their attitude was completely changing towards the women, especially towards me, because at that time I was the mother of the temple, I was taking care of everybody, and their mentality changed completely. So I was getting more and more worried, and even though nobody ever dared to directly tell me you are not allowed to give classes anymore like they did in America, but the feeling was more and more, you know, trying to get me out of doing it indirectly. So I went with Yogeshwar to see Prabhupada to ask him about the women giving classes. And he kept on, and I was giving as example, Jyotirmayi has always been giving classes, so is it possible for the women to give classes, that I give classes? And Prabhupada, the way he presented it, he said, yeah, Jyotirmayi can give class and you can give class. I mean, I have the tape and I have the transcript of it. I don't remember now in the details. But the general idea is that that your husband is a Brahmin, so you are a Brahmin, you can give classes. You know, you assist your husband in his Brahminical work, so you can give classes. You know, so he gave me, he reassured me that I could give classes, and so I went on for a little longer, giving the classes, being reassured by him, and then later on, it was becoming more and more heavy. You know, the pressure against women giving classes, especially then at that time I was the only one doing it. So I wrote to Prabhupada again on the subject matter. And then it's a little funny what happened, is that at that time when I wrote him, Prabhupada was not anymore directly answering himself the lecture, but he had the letters. He had his secretary, Brahmananda, he would tell him the answer, and Brahmananda would write the answer and send it. It was not his own writing anymore like before. So at that time, I had written to Prabhupada about that, and Bhagavan was the GBC there, had written to Prabhupada about something else. So Brahmananda, when he sent us the answer, he sent us in the same letter. And so one part was the answer to Bhagavan, and then there was a little part at the end, which was his answer to me. And if you know what happened with that letter, Bhagavan never showed it to me. He read his part and then threw it in the garbage and didn't show me my part of the answer. And somehow or other, and there I think it was Krishna in the heart, I had to go in his office for something. And for some reason, I don't know why, I looked in the garbage can and I saw the letter. And I opened the letter and I saw the answer that was given to me. And again, the answer was, yes, you can, Jyotirmayi said, and as far as Jyotirmayi's question, yes, she can give classes. You know, you can tell her that, yes, she can give classes, you know. But this was so heavy that Bhagavan didn't want me to know the answer, and with the pressure that even though I was not stopped officially, I was so disgusted and discouraged that I stopped at that time, you know, to lecture. So this in fact, so the only direct question I had to Prabhupada was on this subject matter, you know. Another one that was interesting also, because it was a learning experience also on how to talk to people. This devotee, this man, it's a devotee called Prituputra who had him come, and he was the head of the only vegetarian chain of stores, the chain of vegetarian stores in France, because at that time it was very rare, you know, vegetarianism. But this one, he was the director of this chain called La Vie Claire, and he had one shop like that in the main cities of France. So it was, in a sense, an extraordinary personality, because he was the only one in the whole of France who was doing that. So again, you know, the people, they would be very gladly coming to see Prabhupada. So he came to see Prabhupada. He was called Monsieur Geoffroy. And so they discussed on pure life and pure eating. And what was interesting on their discussion is that this Monsieur Geoffroy was trying to really explain how through vegetarian biological food, especially biological food, you can eat very, very pure things. But still, the point was coming that it's very difficult to have completely, absolutely pure. Because even though you may grow biological, I mean, you have the rain with all kind of acid and toxic things coming on your field. So you want to buy a paper plate, and your paper plate, they have put some animal fat in it, or you have your bees to create your pure honey, but they may have been taking the pollen from some flowers where there's toxic you know, the things they put, you know, to make the things grow, pesticide or things like that. So they were discussing like that, coming to the point that it's not really possible to have fully pure. And so then Prabhupada said, that's the reason why we chant Hare Krishna, because it's impossible to have it completely pure. But through the chanting, then you can make it completely pure. So I remember that Prabhupada at this point, which is a good point for whoever really wants to have completely pure food, that the only way to make it completely pure is to chant Hare Krishna. After you have tried everything, that will be the only thing that will make it finally completely pure. Yogeshwar and I, we used to have to quarrel over the service, you know, what was the best way to do the service, and he had his idea and I had my idea, so often we would have discussion on that and quarreling over that. And at one moment, Prabhupada, he told us, and don't quarrel so much. And we were wondering, how does he know, that we are quarreling? And he gave the example, but that the quarreling of devotees is not like ordinary quarreling, because they are quarreling about how is the best way to serve Krishna, you know. So this also happened. But what I discussed with him was the curriculum, was what we should teach or not teach. And he gave me very good ideas on some points. Like I was talking to him about history, and if we should teach him history. And Prabhupada said two very good points on how to teach history. So he said yes. He said, first, they should be taught what everyone knows, you know, which means that it's not that we have to go into all the details, you know, but it should not be that they appear ignorant, you know, they don't know who is Napoleon, or, you know, there's some basics that they should know, you know, and even not just basics, you know, but what most educated people know about history, our children should know, you know, so that's very important instruction. He gave another instruction on geography. So he said yes, that they should learn geography, the hills, the mountains, the rivers, you know, all these things. On history also he gave another very good point. He said that they should be told the facts, not the interpretations, you know, so this was also interesting. And as far, and the point where I've always been a little bit confused about was the biology. I asked him about, because we were in the country, you know, so I was saying, so what about teaching them about, you know, the birds, the trees, the different kind of flowers, you know, all this thing on biology. And there Prabhupada was not interested. He said, what you should teach them is who it is coming from, that there is the trees, there is the flowers, there is the birds. You know, he wanted more that it be the philosophical aspect that be presented to them more than the actual biology. So as far as the curriculum, these are some of the points I remember we discussed in that particular talk we had. But I think that's mainly what I discussed. Because I did some changes that, according to me, was more appropriate because of practical experience, and I was criticized for it, you know. But like, for example, I could have asked Prabhupada, but I didn't think of doing it. At that time, the children would just go attend the general Bhagavatam class, you know, every day. And we teachers would be there trying constantly to stop them from being nonsense, from doing some coloring or something, you know, so then they disturb the class, and the children, their last interest was hearing what was going on in the class. So I was doing like everybody else. But then it just took me a few months to realize this is really not a good system, you know. So the next time I did a Gurukul, I didn't do that anymore. I did myself a special Bhagavatam class for the children, directed to the children, and it worked much better. But I didn't get the chance to discuss it with Prabhupada and ask Prabhupada, what do you think about that? Would it be a good idea? So I just did it, you know, just on the principle that Prabhupada told us when he saw what happened in the Gurukul in Dallas. He said these teachers should be hung, those who are doing really outrageous things. And then he said, but use your common sense. But because Prabhupada said that, even though he was not there anymore, I could not ask him. I just used my common sense, you know, and I acted according to common sense. And it was very successful because I had a successful Gurukul and I didn't get all the problems with the children that other Gurukuls got, who just did the regular way without adapting according to children, you know. Before I joined, I told you I was a university student. So after I've been something like 2 years, 2 years in a movement, and wanting so much to preach, at one moment I considered, wow, maybe if I had gone on with my studies, because it was ethnology, it was religion and culture of the different countries, I could have taught Vaishnavism in the university. And the university I was going was this very known university, the Sorbonne, you know. So I was thinking like that, and I was discussing it with Yogeshwar, that maybe I should go back and then I could teach like that in the university. And Yogeshwar asked the question to Prabhupada, and he said, so he explained the situation, how I was a student, and he said, what about Jyotirmayi, going back to university, finishing your course, and then being able to teach Krishna consciousness in the Sorbonne? And Prabhupada said, yes, she can do it. She's a very intelligent girl. So this is also something, you see, many of the things that happened with me directly with Prabhupada, I've been things that have been comforting me for the rest of my time in Krishna consciousness, because many of the things that women have been accused of, you know, like being stupid, being completely unable to become Krishna conscious or to be good devotees, you know, personally, Prabhupada himself, you know, in different instances said I was a good devotee. In that instance and another instance when we were discussing Gurukul, he said in 2 instances that she's a very intelligent girl. So I was thinking, well, they may be saying all these things, you know, but I know what Prabhupada has told me, you know, and this gave me courage to go on and go on, even though there was all these problems as far as the women are concerned. It was at a time when I was in very much confusion, because we had moved the BBT to New York, because New York was the place where now there was the international BBT, so all the translators were there working together, so I was there also doing the translation, and I was getting kind of disturbed because it was very difficult, because I was losing my French, you know, so when you translate you better speak good French, and by never speaking French, and I could not get new translators. I had only Americans around me, you know, so I couldn't see how I would develop the translation work. So I wanted very much to go back to France and do it there. But of course the temple presidents and the leaders, they didn't want Yogeshwar and me to leave, because we were also doing so many services, you know, so they wanted to keep us there. So in one way I could understand that they wanted us there, but at the same time I was thinking I can never really develop Prabhupada's French BBT in that way. So I was very much in anxiety, and one day I was really praying and praying and praying in front of Prabhupada's picture to know what to do, you know, in this circumstance. And about the same time, there has been discussion about a GBC going to France. And I had written a letter to Prabhupada only on a very specific translation thing, which was that the word Supreme Personality of Godhead was very difficult to translate for us in France. So it was difficult to know what to do. So I wrote to Prabhupada and I told him, so we could do, I gave him 3 proposals. You know, I said, what do you think is the best of the 3 proposals? Which I translated back, you know, in English so that he would understand. So then he answered me on these 3 proposals. He told me, so you take this one, which is the one we have been using since then. And at the same time, he told me in that letter, so now I'm sending Bhagavad-gita to be the GBC in France, and I think that you and your husband, you should go back to France now and do your work there, you know. So I thought, phew, I mean, this is really mystical, that I prayed to have an answer, but he didn't write about it. And in his answer to my technical question of translation is giving me the answer to my particular problem. And the way I explain that is that it's Satsvarmaj who explained that, because devotees, they're really wondering, I mean, how much does the spiritual master know the devotee's heart? And he asked, Satsvarmaj had asked the question to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada gave the answer that it is as much as the devotee thinks of the spiritual master thinks of the devotee. So what I understood from that is that when you're so intense in your prayer to Prabhupada, so intense and sincere, then Prabhupada does hear your prayer. You may be, thousands of kilometers away, and does in one way or another answer you, But sometimes our prayer is not so strong and we don't get the answer because the message didn't go through because the intensity was not there. So that's how I explain it. Some people might explain it in some other ways. But that was interesting. He gave me one instruction at that time, which is something I've always been having difficulties working on, which is he told me, don't do everything yourself. Get other people to do the work, because the idea is that in order to do a lot, you have to have plenty of people doing some, that you delegate, that they do the work so that you can do more and more. Otherwise, you can never do enough, So, and it's interesting that he told me that at that time, because this is one point which is difficult for me, to be able to always gather enough devotees to do the work so that I can do always more and more, because when I'm myself doing all the details, I cannot do much. But if I can get people to do the details, then I can do more and more and more. So for me personally, it was an interesting instruction. When Prabhupada came to New Mayapur at that time, I was the Gurukul headmistress. So my relationship with him was as far as the Gurukul. So, and something very interesting happened also at that time. So Prabhupada wanted to meet all the Gurukul children, all the teachers. So we all went to his room, and Prabhupada gave a very nice speech. And so, that's the interesting part. One of the things Prabhupada wanted us to do was to have the children chant japa. And the way people used to do it before was to give them these long japa beads, like us, and have them with everybody else in the temple room, and try to have them chant and punish them very heavily if they didn't chant, And when I saw that, when I arrived and I saw this is the way they were doing it, I thought, wow, this is really bad. I don't want to do it that way, So with another devotee, he gave a very nice idea, and we started to do the system, which was to have the children, instead of chanting the way we do, they were chanting the kind of rhythmic way. And the children loved to do it in that way, in this rhythmic way. And the change I did, that instead of giving them the big beads, I had little smaller beads for them, with only the quarter of a round or half of a round. So when they would chant, they would feel that they were chanting many rounds, because that's what is difficult for children. By the end, they have done one round, took them 1 hour, they're exhausted, and it's only one. Well, when they see that they can do so many, they're very excited, and they compete with who is going to do more rounds. So it was working very good. But some of the devotees, they were getting disturbed because we were doing this kind of funny way of chanting. And sometimes we would chant in the temple room. So we would have all the children chanting in this rhythmic way, and the others were disturbed, and they said, why do you make them chant like that? This is not authentic, this is not bona fide, and I was receiving criticism. But I kept on anyway, because what's important is that they chant, we have to find ways so that they're happy chanting. So when I brought all the children like that to see Prabhupada, then Prabhupada told them to chant japa. So they started to chant in this way, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. That's the way they used to do it. So they started to chant like that, and they chanted with really great enthusiasm, the way they used to do it when we chant together in the ashram. And Prabhupada loved it. He loved it so much that he had them chant and go on chanting like that, and then he had them stand up, and they were standing up and dancing at the same time, chanting in that way, their japa. So which proves that Prabhupada is very much appreciative of innovations, as long as it's successful, So I was very glad that Prabhupada did that, because I received criticism, and here I had Prabhupada who was completely accepting this, the way I was doing it. So I could say that what struck me the most with Prabhupada was his intelligence, how he was able to, and this is a sign of intelligence, how intelligent he was, how he was able to, at the same time, be completely transcendental and completely down to earth. Because that's one of the things which is a big problem with devotees. Most of them, at the time, they're so transcendental that they're completely out of touch with reality and they do all kind of nonsense, and that hurts a lot of the movement. And what struck me the most with Prabhupada is that he was able to be at the same time in Krishna Loka, having a relationship with Krishna, at the same time, so practical, so down to earth, so concerned with all the specifics, all the details, of daily life, and how he trained these first devotees in that way, And for me, this is the highest intelligence of Prabhupada, and that's why I think that you cannot understand Krishna consciousness only from reading his books. The only way you can understand is from reading his books and understanding his personal life, his personal example, how he lived the philosophy. If you do that, if you have both together, then you can really understand how to practice Krishna consciousness. And very often the problems we have is that people, they try to live Krishna consciousness only according to the books, but not according to Prabhupada's personal example, which we know now through all the books written by all the different devotees who talk about Prabhupada, or all the memories of all the devotees about Prabhupada. And for me, many of the things that I have done in Krishna consciousness were based on some instruction he gave just by talking with devotees, in a very casual way, So, I mean, that's one of the things that particularly struck me on this completely spiritual intelligence. I mean, maybe because I'm attracted to intellectual things, but what Prabhupada for me is the greatest intellectual of the planet. Such an intelligent person, and I'm very much attracted to that.